Hello there again. Today we have the privilege of talking to the president of the The Hague Institute for Global Justice, Dr. Williams. Dr. Williams, thank you very much for giving the interview for us today. Actually, let me start out asking the question. The institute here in The Hague obviously is related to international justice, but what are the origins of the institute?
Well, the Hague Institute for Global Justice was founded nearly 3 years ago, and we're a think and do tank, and we work at issues at the critical intersection of peace, security, and justice. The mayor of The Hague, Josias van Atzen, who's a former Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands, was the inspiration behind the creation of the Hague Institute, and together with several Hague-based partners here in the city, put together this institute, which is already making an important contribution to thought and to practical activities at the intersection of peace, security, and justice.
Yes, it probably fits so well into the international city of peace and justice, indeed. And in this course, we have dealt with several issues, indeed, related to those topics. Actually, let me also ask you, we know that in the past you have had several important functions. One actually has been as the Director of Strategic Studies in the Executive Office of the UN Secretary General. And let me just ask you, if you look back at that function, what were some of the major challenges you had to deal with, and what were maybe some of the really good experiences?
Well, I served as you rightly say, as Director of Strategic Planning for UN Secretary General Kofi Annan and Ban Ki-moon for nearly 7 years. One of the strategic planning is an important aspect of the work of any organization, whether national or international. The main challenge is that you have to think about issues which are beyond the horizon, but yet an organization like the United Nations, and certainly the Secretary General, has to deal with daily crises. So trying to find the balance between thinking about long-range issues in the political, economic, human rights, social fields, while at the same time dealing with crises which might erupt at any moment, was a central challenge. I think some of the contributions of being a strategic planner, and certainly in that role, was coming up with strategic initiatives which the Secretary General was able to achieve with the support of the UN member states. For example, coming up with a new peace-building architecture which would help the international community to do a better job in helping nations make the difficult transition from war to peace and to put them on the path to sustainable peace and development. So the peace-building architecture comprises both the Peace-Building Commission, the Peace-Building Support Office, and the Peace-Building Fund. We also worked closely while I was in the Secretary General's office to bring about a new Human Rights Council, because the previous body, the Human Rights Commission, had been discredited, it was politicized. And the Human Rights Council, I think, was another critical development which happened during my time in the Secretary General's office.
Thank you. Actually, if you look at maybe the Security Council at this moment, and if we look very specifically at, the broad domain of conflict prevention, what would you say are the possibilities and where are the clear limitations of the organization?
Well, the Security Council, under the Charter, has primary responsibility for maintaining international peace and security. And in the 90s, one of my first peacekeeping mission was in the Balkans, in Macedonia, where I served with the UN Preventive Deployment Force, which was deployed in Macedonia in the 90s. And in that case, we had a very good example where the Security Council took an unprecedented and unfollowed decision to deploy UN peacekeepers before the onset of conflict. And the UNPREDEP was a fairly successful mission which helped to prevent the conflict which was then raging in other parts of former Yugoslavia from actually spreading into Macedonia. And we used both the presence of UN peacekeepers on the borders of Macedonia and our good offices' mandate to work with the Macedonian authorities and all groups within the country to manage, of course, a delicate interethnic situation. This is a good example of the Security Council getting ahead of a potentially violent situation. Part of the challenge, of course, of the Council is that it is a political body. And in order for the Council to be effective in terms of prevention, you need the support of the members of the Security Council, in particular the 5 permanent members. In the case of Macedonia, there was clear political will, there was agreement among the P5 to take action. In other situations where you have a difference of view among the permanent members, it is very difficult for the Security Council to act. And of course, the P5 all have the veto. And if you have an exercise of the veto, that can paralyze the Security Council.
Maybe a recent example, Syria, where we see these kind of deadlocks occur.
Yes, well, Syria is a very tragic situation where we've had tremendous loss of life. In 2005, as part of the last reform initiative of Kofi Annan, at the UN World Summit, all the heads of state and government unanimously adopted the responsibility to protect. And the responsibility to protect, of course, the primary responsibility lies with member states, but if member states are unwilling or unable to protect their own citizens from genocide, from mass atrocities, from ethnic cleansing and war crimes, then the responsibility falls on the international community acting through the Security Council. It is clear, at least to my mind, that the international community has failed in its responsibility to protect the people of Syria. But again, the dynamics in the Security Council has made this very difficult, because there's a clear difference of view from countries like the United States, Great Britain and France and Russia and China. And when you have that division in the Council, it is extremely difficult for the Council to take the kind of action which is required both to prevent and to manage these horrific crimes from happening.
Dr. Williams, I think this was a wonderful interview, gave us a lot of insights into issues related to the maintenance of global peace and stability. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed.